5 gunshots shattered the bass-heavy silence of Miami's most exclusive nightclub at exactly 3:47 a.m. on September 15, 2024. By the time security broke down the locked bathroom door of Velvet Dreams, 2 bodies lay sprawled across imported Italian marble tiles, their blood mixing with spilled champagne and shattered glass from a bottle of Dom Perignon that had cost more than most people earned in a week. What Marco Delgado found inside that executive bathroom wasn't just a crime scene. It was the violent conclusion of a relationship that had begun with desperation, evolved through manipulation, and ended with 5 bullets and a single self-inflicted shot to the temple. The man who pulled the trigger had been planning a political campaign. The woman he killed had been carrying his child. Tonight, we're taking you inside one of Miami's most shocking cases of blackmail, betrayal, and murder that crossed cultural boundaries and exposed the dark underbelly of power and exploitation. This isn't just another crime story. This is a deep dive into what happens when survival instincts collide with desperation, when affairs turn into leverage, and when the American dream becomes a nightmare soaked in blood. You're about to witness how a green card sponsorship transformed into the deadliest weapon imaginable. Her name was Anya Marie Cruz, and if you had seen her just 8 hours before that fatal night, serving cocktails with a smile that never quite reached her eyes, you would have noticed the small bump beneath her black Velvet Dreams uniform. 29 years old, 6 months pregnant, and trapped in a country where her visa had expired 11 months earlier, Anya had been recording everything. Every conversation, every promise, every intimate moment with the married man who owned the club where she poured $1,000 bottles for Miami's elite. His name was Richard Vincent Castellano, and 8 hours before Marco found his body with a Glock 19 still warm in his right hand, he had kissed his wife Elena goodbye and told his 14-year-old daughter Sofia that he loved her. 42 years old, third-generation Cuban-American, owner of Miami's most profitable nightclub, and the son-in-law of one of the city's most powerful political figures. Richard had everything to lose, and Anya Cruz had made certain he knew it. Marco Delgado, 28 years old and a former Marine who had served 2 tours in Iraq, had seen death before. But nothing in Fallujah had prepared him for what waited behind that locked door. He had been making his standard 3:45 a.m. security sweep of Velvet Dreams when he heard the first shot echo through the empty corridors of the second-floor executive area. The sound was muffled, distant, but unmistakable to anyone who had spent time in a combat zone. The next 4 shots came in rapid succession. Pop, 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 pop. Then silence that stretched for exactly 43 seconds before the final gunshot cracked through the air like thunder. Marco's training kicked in immediately. He called for backup on his radio while sprinting toward the executive bathroom, a private facility reserved exclusively for Richard Castellano and his high-level business associates. The door was solid mahogany with a brushed steel handle and an electronic keycard lock that glowed red. Locked from the inside. "Mr. Castellano," Marco shouted, pounding on the door with his fist. "Security. Are you all right?" Nothing. Just the oppressive silence of a nightclub after closing, when the music had died and 3,000 people had stumbled back out into Miami's humid night, leaving behind only the ghost of bass and the smell of expensive alcohol. Marco made the decision that would haunt his dreams for years to come. He stepped back and drove his shoulder into the door with the full force of his 210 pounds. The door held. Again. The frame cracked slightly. A third time, and the lock mechanism finally surrendered with a metallic shriek. The door swung inward, and Marco's world tilted. Richard Castellano lay on his back, his $3,000 Armani suit now decorated with blood spatter and brain matter. His right hand still clutched the gun, his index finger frozen on the trigger. A single bullet hole marked his right temple, the entry wound small and neat, the exit wound significantly less so. His eyes were open, staring at the bathroom's crystal chandelier with the blank gaze of the dead. But it was the second body that made Marco's stomach turn. Anya Cruz lay crumpled against the far wall, her body twisted at an unnatural angle, one hand stretched toward her phone that had fallen just inches from her fingertips. 5 gunshot wounds marked her small frame. The first had caught her in the chest, just below her left breast. The second in her abdomen, where her 6-month pregnancy would have been obvious to anyone looking. The third in her right shoulder. The fourth in her neck, where blood had pooled in a spreading crimson lake. The fifth had gone through her left hand, suggesting she had raised it in a desperate, futile attempt to protect herself. The phone screen was still lit, a recording app open and running. The timer read 47 minutes and 18 seconds. Marco backed out of the bathroom, his hands shaking as he keyed his radio. "Control, this is Delgado. I need Miami-Dade police and fire rescue at Velvet Dreams immediately. We have 2 bodies. Gunshot wounds. Both deceased. This is a homicide scene." The smell hit him then, overwhelming the usual nightclub cocktail of alcohol and perfume. Gunpowder, blood, and something else. Something expensive and out of place. Richard's cologne. Tom Ford Tobacco Vanille. For $100 a bottle. While Marco secured the scene and waited for police, he noticed details that would later become crucial evidence. A large black duffel bag sat near Richard's feet, partially unzipped. Inside, stacks of cash were visible. Lots of cash. The bathroom's marble sink held the remnants of what appeared to be champagne, 2 glasses sitting side by side, one with lipstick marks that matched the shade Anya had been wearing. On the floor, near Richard's left hand, lay a single piece of paper folded into quarters. Marco knew he shouldn't touch anything, but he could see writing through the thin paper. A suicide note. Detective Sarah Ramos of Miami-Dade Homicide arrived at Velvet Dreams at 4:15 a.m., exactly 28 minutes after Marco's call. 15 years on the force had taught her that the worst crimes often happened in the most beautiful places, but even she paused when she saw the executive bathroom where 2 lives had ended. Sarah was 41 years old, Cuban-American like half of Miami, and had worked her way up from patrol officer to homicide detective through a combination of relentless dedication and an almost supernatural ability to read crime scenes. She had seen murder-suicides before, domestic violence situations where love turned to rage, financial desperation that ended with bullets. But something about this scene felt different. The positioning was wrong. If Richard had simply snapped and killed Anya in a moment of passion, the bodies would be closer together. Instead, they were separated by nearly 6 feet, suggesting Anya had tried to escape. The number of shots was excessive. 5 rounds into a woman who probably weighed no more than 110 pounds. That wasn't passion. That was execution. And then the careful placement of the gun in his own hand, the suicide note in his pocket, the money in the bag. This was planned. Sarah knelt beside Richard's body, careful not to disturb the blood pool that had spread across the white marble like a grotesque work of abstract art. She examined the gun. Glock 19 9mm, standard issue for half the law enforcement agencies in America and the preferred weapon for people who wanted reliability over flash. The serial number was visible. It would be easy to trace. She moved to Anya's body, noting the defensive wounds on her hands, the trajectory of the bullets, the terror that must have filled her final moments. The pregnancy was obvious now, the curve of her abdomen visible beneath her uniform. Sarah felt a familiar anger building in her chest. Whatever this woman had done, whatever role she had played in this tragedy, she didn't deserve to die like this. Neither did her unborn child. The phone caught Sarah's attention. She carefully photographed its position before using a gloved hand to pick it up. The recording was still running, the app having captured everything until its battery finally died at 4:17 a.m. Sarah stopped the recording and secured the phone as evidence. Whatever was on that recording would tell them exactly what happened in this room. But it was the suicide note that provided the first real answer. Sarah unfolded the paper with gloved hands and read Richard Castellano's final words. She won. She always wins. I couldn't let her, but now everyone will know anyway. To my wife Elena, I'm sorry. To my daughters, I was weak. Anya Cruz destroyed me, but I destroyed her first. Check the cloud drive. Password. Lost everything 2024. The truth is all there. By 6 a.m., the story had already begun to leak. Social media posts from club staff who had heard the commotion. News helicopters circling overhead. Reporters gathering outside the police tape. And in a mansion in Coral Gables, Elena Castellano was about to receive a knock on her door that would shatter her carefully constructed world. What none of them knew yet was that Anya Cruz had prepared for exactly this scenario. She had anticipated that Richard might try something desperate, and she had built an insurance policy that would detonate like a bomb in Miami's political establishment, even from beyond the grave. To understand how a Filipino bartender and a millionaire nightclub owner ended up dead in a locked bathroom, you need to go back 18 months. Back to when Anya Marie Cruz stepped off a flight from Manila at Miami International Airport with nothing but 2 suitcases, a tourist visa that would expire in 4 months, and dreams that would ultimately cost her everything. Anya was born in 1995 in Quezon City, one of Metro Manila's sprawling urban districts where millions of Filipinos lived packed into concrete apartments, chasing opportunities that always seemed just out of reach. Her mother, Luisa Cruz, had raised 3 children alone after Anya's father disappeared when Anya was 12 years old. No explanation, no goodbye, just an empty chair at the dinner table and bills that kept arriving with no money to pay them. The Cruz family lived in a 200-square-foot apartment on the 4th floor of a building with no elevator and intermittent electricity. Anya shared a single room with her younger sister Marie, 15, and younger brother Gabriel, 18. Her mother worked as a domestic helper for a wealthy family in Makati, earning $400 a month for 12-hour days, 6 days a week. It was barely enough to survive. But Anya was smart, brilliant even. She had graduated from the University of Santo Tomas in 2017 with a degree in business management, an achievement that had required her to work nights at a call center while attending classes during the day. For 6 years after graduation, she supervised a team of 20 customer service representatives at a business process outsourcing company, handling complaints from angry Americans about their credit card bills and internet service. The pay was $400 a month, the same amount her mother made scrubbing toilets. Anya watched her coworkers, many of them also college graduates, trapped in the same cycle, working for American companies, speaking perfect English, solving complex problems, but earning wages that kept them perpetually one emergency away from destitution. She watched her mother's hands become gnarled with arthritis from years of manual labor. She watched her sister Marie struggle to afford school supplies. She watched her brother Gabriel give up on university because they couldn't afford the tuition. And Anya made a decision. She would get to America, not through the proper channels, which could take decades and required resources her family didn't have, but through any means necessary. The opportunity came through Sofia Reyes, a college acquaintance who had moved to Miami 3 years earlier. Sofia posted photos on Facebook of her life in America. Beaches, shopping malls, cars. The American dream packaged in filtered Instagram posts. When Anya reached out, Sofia was honest about the reality. She worked 3 jobs, lived in a shared apartment in Little Havana with 5 other Filipino immigrants, and her tourist visa had expired 2 years ago. But she was making money, real money, enough to send home and save. Sofia knew people who could help with the visa application. It would cost $3,000, money that Anya's family didn't have. So Anya did what millions of Filipinos do every year. She borrowed from a loan shark at 20% monthly interest. On March 15, 2023, Anya Cruz cleared customs at Miami International Airport with a 90-day tourist visa and a plan to overstay it. She told her mother she would send money within 3 months. She promised Marie she would bring her to America once she got established. She assured Gabriel she would pay for his education from abroad. The reality of Miami hit Anya like a physical blow. Sofia's apartment was in one of the city's roughest neighborhoods, a crumbling building where gunshots at night were common, and the air conditioning worked only occasionally. The spare room Sofia had mentioned was actually a couch in the living room that Anya would share with another immigrant. The cost was $400 a month. Anya's first job was cleaning houses for wealthy families in Coral Gables and Coconut Grove. Cash only. No questions asked. $10 an hour for backbreaking work that left her hands raw and her back aching. She worked 6 days a week, 12 hours a day, and sent half her earnings back to Manila to pay down the loan shark debt and support her family. By July 2023, Anya's tourist visa had expired. She was now officially an undocumented immigrant, living in constant fear of deportation. The loan shark's interest was accumulating faster than she could pay it down. Her mother had started receiving threatening phone calls. Anya needed something better, something legal, something that would give her a path to citizenship. That's when she saw the job posting on Craigslist. Velvet Dreams seeks attractive female bartenders. Multilingual preferred. Work visa sponsorship available for the right candidate. The phrase work visa sponsorship jumped off the screen like a lifeline thrown to a drowning woman. Anya knew it was probably too good to be true, but she was desperate enough to try. Richard Vincent Castellano had been born into a life that Anya could barely imagine. His father, Vincent Castellano Sr., was a real estate developer who had made his fortune in Miami during the 1980s boom, buying properties in South Beach before it became fashionable and selling them for 10 times what he paid. The family lived in a 6,000-square-foot mansion in Coral Gables with a pool, a tennis court, and staff quarters that were larger than most Miami apartments. Richard was the youngest of 3 children and the only son, which meant he was simultaneously spoiled and burdened with expectations. He attended private schools where his classmates were the children of Miami's elite, Cuban exile families who had rebuilt their fortunes, American entrepreneurs who had discovered Miami's potential, and South American oligarchs who needed a safe place to park their money. His education at the University of Miami had been unremarkable. He graduated in 2004 with a business degree earned through a combination of average intelligence, family connections, and professors who knew better than to fail Vincent Castellano's son. His grades were mediocre, but his social connections were golden. In 2008, at 26 years old, Richard married Elena Mendoza in a wedding that was covered by Miami Social magazine and attended by half of the city's power structure. Elena was the daughter of Rafael Mendoza, a Cuban-American who had built a political dynasty through decades of community organizing, strategic alliances, and an almost supernatural understanding of Miami's complex ethnic politics. Rafael had served as a city commissioner for 20 years, and his blessing was essential for anyone seeking political office in Miami's Cuban-American-dominated power structure. The marriage was love, but it was also strategy. Elena brought political connections that Richard's family's money couldn't buy. Richard brought business acumen and the kind of polished, telegenic charm that would play well in political campaigns. They had 2 daughters, Sophia in 2010 and Isabella in 2013, and settled into the comfortable rhythm of Miami's upper class. But Richard had a problem that his money and connections couldn't solve. He was easily bored, and he had learned early in life that consequences were for other people. His first affair happened in 2012, 4 years into his marriage, with a waitress at one of his father's restaurants. It lasted 3 months before Richard grew tired of her and ended it with a generous severance package and a glowing letter of recommendation. Elena never knew, or if she did, she chose not to acknowledge it. The pattern repeated itself over the next 12 years, always with employees, always with women from lower economic classes who would be grateful for his attention and unlikely to cause problems, always with careful exit strategies that involved money, NDAs where appropriate, and the understanding that discretion was in everyone's best interest. By 2023, Richard had refined his approach to a science. He had learned to compartmentalize his life into separate boxes. There was Richard the husband, who attended his daughter's school events and kissed his wife goodbye every morning. There was Richard the businessman, who had inherited Velvet Dreams from his father in 2018 and turned it into one of Miami's most profitable nightclubs through a combination of good marketing and political connections that kept licensing problems at bay. And there was Richard the serial cheater, who saw affairs as a perk of success rather than a betrayal of trust. His world was perfect, controlled, sustainable. And then Anya Cruz walked into her interview at Velvet Dreams on August 22, 2023, and Richard saw something he wanted. The interview was conducted by Carlos Rivera, Velvet Dreams' general manager, but Richard always made it a point to personally approve new female bartenders. He told himself it was about maintaining the club's aesthetic standards. The truth was less noble. Anya sat across from Richard in his office wearing a borrowed professional outfit that didn't quite fit and makeup that couldn't completely hide her exhaustion. But she was beautiful in a way that went beyond physical appearance. There was intelligence in her eyes, desperation in her posture, and determination in the way she answered questions. "Your English is excellent," Richard said, reviewing her fabricated resume that claimed she had work authorization pending. "Thank you, Mr. Castellano. I worked in customer service for 6 years in Manila. I'm very comfortable with American customers. And you're interested in our visa sponsorship program?" Anya's eyes lit up with hope that she couldn't completely conceal. "Yes, sir. Very much. I want to build a life here legally. I'm willing to work hard." Richard saw the desperation. He recognized it from a dozen previous encounters with women who needed something he could provide. He also saw opportunity. Anya was exactly the type of woman he was attracted to, beautiful, vulnerable, and grateful. "The sponsorship process is complicated," Richard said, deploying the script he had used before. "It takes time to build the right documentation. We need to show immigration that you're a valuable employee, that you have skills we can't find in American workers. I understand. I'll do whatever is necessary. Richard smiled. I'm sure you will. Welcome to Velvet Dreams, Anya. He hired her on the spot with a base pay of $12 an hour, well below what he paid other bartenders but more than she was making cleaning houses. He promised to begin the sponsorship process after a probationary period of 3 months. It was a lie. Richard had never sponsored a single employee for a work visa in his life. But Anya didn't know that. Not yet. What Richard also didn't know was that Anya Cruz had already begun documenting everything. Her first journal entry, written the night after her interview, read, "Met the owner today, Richard Castellano. He's exactly the type of man I expected. Wealthy, confident, and interested in more than just my bartending skills. He promised visa sponsorship. I don't trust him. I need to protect myself. Starting today, I'm recording every conversation, every promise, every interaction. If he tries to use me and throw me away like he probably has with others, I'll have evidence. This is survival. This is insurance." 2 people from completely different worlds, each with their own desperate needs, were now on a collision course that would end with 5 gunshots in a locked bathroom. Neither of them could have imagined how quickly desperation would transform into deadly leverage. The affair between Richard Castellano and Anya Cruz began officially on October 7, 2023, though the groundwork had been carefully laid over the preceding 6 weeks. Richard had spent September cultivating what he believed was a controllable situation, a desperate immigrant, an asymmetrical power dynamic, and his practiced ability to compartmentalize extramarital encounters into discrete boxes that never contaminated his primary life. What Richard failed to understand was that Anya had been cultivating something too, a comprehensive insurance policy that would document every promise, every intimate moment, every piece of leverage she might eventually need. The Brickell Avenue condominium that Richard maintained for his affairs was purchased in 2019 through an LLC that bore no obvious connection to his name. Unit 4208 at Azure Towers cost him $4,200 monthly, charged to a business credit card under the category of corporate housing for visiting executives. The 2-bedroom unit overlooked Biscayne Bay, featuring floor-to-ceiling windows, designer furniture from room and board totaling $82,000, and most importantly, complete privacy. No doorman who knew his wife, no neighbors from his social circle. No security cameras in the private elevator that serviced only 4 units per floor. On that first evening, Richard arrived at 7:15 carrying a bottle of Chateau Margaux 2015 that cost $950 and a folder he claimed contained visa sponsorship paperwork. Anya arrived at 7:30 wearing the same borrowed professional outfit from her interview, her hands trembling slightly as she knocked. Richard opened the door with the practiced warmth of a man who had orchestrated this scenario many times before. "Welcome," he said, gesturing her inside with a smile that was meant to put her at ease while simultaneously establishing his control of the space, the situation, the entire encounter. The wine was poured into Riedel crystal glasses. They sat on the leather sofa overlooking the city lights spreading toward the horizon like a carpet of artificial stars. Richard opened the folder and Anya saw documents that appeared to be immigration forms, H-1B visa applications, labor certification paperwork. Everything looked official, dense with legal terminology and bureaucratic formatting. But Anya, who had researched visa processes obsessively during her months of desperation, noticed something wrong immediately. The forms were outdated versions, easily identifiable by the revision dates in tiny print at the bottom. These were templates Richard had downloaded from government websites, filled in with Anya's basic information, but never actually filed with any immigration authority. Still, she said nothing. She nodded as Richard explained the process, the timeline, the complexity. He spoke with the confidence of someone who had never been questioned, never been doubted, never faced consequences. "It will take 3 to 4 months to get everything properly documented," he said. "We need to establish your value to the company, build a paper trail that shows immigration officials why you're essential." Anya sipped her wine and performed the role of grateful recipient, asking careful questions, expressing appropriate concern about timing, and all the while, her phone sat in her purse on the floor beside the sofa, its voice recording app activated, capturing every word. The seduction unfolded with mechanical precision. Richard refilled her glass twice, each pour calculated to lower inhibitions without creating obvious intoxication. He moved closer gradually, first his arm along the back of the sofa, then his hand on her shoulder, finally his lips near her ear as he whispered how beautiful she was, how much he had thought about her since the interview, how special she seemed compared to other employees. Anya responded with carefully calibrated enthusiasm, allowing herself to be guided toward the bedroom at 8:43, her phone still recording from the living room, capturing the sounds of what happened next with enough clarity that forensic audio experts would later be able to create detailed timelines. The physical encounter lasted 37 minutes. Afterward, lying in Richard's king-sized bed with Egyptian cotton sheets that cost $1,200, Anya made her first strategic move. She turned toward him, her expression vulnerable but determined. "When will we start the actual visa application?" she asked. Richard's response was practiced, honed through previous affairs with previous desperate women. "We need to be smart about timing," he said, stroking her hair with affected tenderness. "If we rush it, immigration will scrutinize everything. Better to build a solid foundation first. Give it until January, maybe February. I promise, Anya, I'm going to take care of you." The promise was recorded. The timeline was noted, and Anya filed both pieces of information away as the first entries in what would become an exhaustive catalog of Richard Castellano's lies. Over the following weeks, the pattern established itself with the regularity of a corporate meeting schedule. Every Tuesday and Thursday at 2 in the afternoon, Richard would leave Velvet Dreams claiming business development meetings. He would drive his Mercedes S-Class to Azure Towers, park in the private garage, and take the elevator to Unit 4208 where Anya would be waiting, having told her roommates she had a second job doing office work for a wealthy client. The routine varied little. Sex first, then conversation during which Anya would gently but persistently inquire about visa sponsorship progress. Richard's responses evolved from vague promises to increasingly elaborate explanations about legal complications, processing delays, and bureaucratic obstacles that required more time, more patience, more trust. By November 2023, Anya had recorded 47 encounters, each one timestamped, each one automatically uploaded to a Google Drive account Richard knew nothing about. The recordings captured not just their physical relationship but Richard's unguarded comments about his life. His complaints about Elena's frigidity, delivered on November 14th. His frustration with Commissioner Mendoza's controlling nature, expressed on November 21st. His excitement about his planned city council campaign, detailed extensively on November 28th, including specific fundraising targets and political strategy. Every piece of information was potential leverage. Every complaint was evidence of dissatisfaction with his marriage. Every casual revelation was ammunition Anya was methodically stockpiling. The financial dimensions of their relationship escalated in December. On December 3rd, Anya's tourist visa officially expired, transforming her from overstayer to fully undocumented immigrant. The shift increased her vulnerability exponentially, and Richard knew it, though he pretended otherwise. "Don't worry about your visa status," he told her on December 5th, their voices captured clearly on recording number 53. "Once we start the sponsorship process, we'll handle all of that. Immigration services are very understanding about these situations when there's a legitimate employer involved." The reassurance was meaningless legally but psychologically effective, keeping Anya dependent on Richard's supposed influence and connections. But Anya was also taking practical steps to protect herself. On December 10th, she paid $500 in cash to meet with immigration attorney Sofia Rodriguez, whose office in Little Havana served Miami's immigrant community with a mixture of legitimate legal service and pragmatic advice about surviving in America's complex immigration system. Anya explained her situation carefully, omitting Richard's name but describing the promised sponsorship, the delays, the power dynamic. Attorney Rodriguez's assessment was blunt and devastating. If an employer has been promising sponsorship for 4 months without filing actual paperwork, they're lying to you. Work visa sponsorship requires upfront filing fees of at least $4,000. Has he paid anything? Anya shook her head. Then he's not sponsoring you. He's using the promise to control you. The truth hit Anya with physical force, a wave of nausea that made her grip the edges of Sofia Rodriguez's desk. But the attorney wasn't finished. "You need documentation," Rodriguez continued. "Everything he's promised, get it in writing. Record conversations if Florida law allows it, and it does. We're a one-party consent state. Build a case. Because when this falls apart, and it will fall apart, you'll need evidence. For immigration purposes, for potential legal action, for protection. Do you understand? Anya nodded, her mind already calculating. She had been recording for 2 months. She had dozens of hours of Richard's promises, his complaints about his wife, his detailed discussions of their future together. She had been building a case without quite realizing that's what it was. Now she understood. This wasn't just insurance. This was a weapon. December brought another significant development in their relationship. Richard's behavior shifted from confident control to something resembling genuine emotional attachment. He began calling Anya late at night, sometimes after midnight, speaking in hushed tones from his home office or his car in the driveway, while Elena and the girls slept inside the Coral Gables house. The conversations, all recorded, revealed a man increasingly dissatisfied with his marriage and increasingly dependent on Anya for emotional validation. On December 18th, during a call that lasted 53 minutes, Richard said something that would become crucial evidence. Elena and I haven't been really married for years. We're roommates raising kids together. You understand me in ways she never has. Sometimes I think about what it would be like if circumstances were different. If I had met you first. If I didn't have all these complications. Anya's response was calculated perfectly. What's stopping you from making circumstances different? The question hung in the air, recorded with perfect clarity, followed by Richard's long pause before he answered. It's complicated. My father-in-law, the campaign, the kids. But I'm not saying never, Anya. I'm saying not now. Not yet. The equivocation was exactly what Anya needed, proof that Richard had contemplated leaving his wife, that their relationship was more than just a physical affair, that his promises implied a future together even if he refused to commit explicitly. The holiday season created new complications and new opportunities. Richard's family obligations increased dramatically, leaving him less available for their Tuesday and Thursday schedule. Anya spent Christmas Day alone in her shared Little Havana apartment while Richard posted family photos on social media, images that Anya saw despite not being friends with him on any platform. She had created fake accounts weeks earlier, carefully curated to appear authentic, allowing her to monitor Richard's public life without his knowledge. The photographs showed exactly what she expected. The perfect family, the expensive decorations, the wrapped presents under a designer tree, Elena and Richard smiling together with their daughters, every image a contradiction of his claims about their failed marriage. On December 27th, when they finally met again at Azure Towers, Anya confronted him gently. I saw your Christmas photos, she said, her tone more curious than accusatory. You looked happy. Richard's response was smooth, practiced, delivered with the ease of someone who had reconciled these contradictions long ago. It's all performance, he explained. For the kids, for Elena's father, for the image we have to maintain. None of it is real. What we have, this is real. He pulled her close, kissed her with manufactured passion, and successfully deflected the conversation away from uncomfortable truths. But Anya was learning that Richard's ability to compartmentalize, to maintain parallel realities without apparent cognitive dissonance, was both his greatest skill and his greatest vulnerability. He believed his own performances so completely that he couldn't see how transparent they were to anyone paying attention. Every reassurance revealed the lie beneath. Every promise exposed the absence of genuine intent. And every day that passed without actual visa paperwork being filed proved that Attorney Rodriguez had been absolutely correct. Richard was never going to sponsor her. He was using the promise as a tool of control, keeping her dependent, keeping her available, keeping her silent about their relationship. By the end of December 2023, Anya Cruz had 68 recordings totaling 43 hours and 17 minutes. She had photographs of Richard entering and leaving Azure Towers, time-stamped and geotagged. She had text messages stretching back to September, thousands of them, many containing explicit sexual content and references to their future together. She had documented every gift he had given her, photographing the items and saving the receipts Richard carelessly left behind. And she had begun to understand something fundamental about her situation. She couldn't rely on Richard's promises. She couldn't trust his timeline. If she wanted legal status, if she wanted security, if she wanted any kind of future in America, she would have to create it herself using the only leverage she possessed. The truth about Richard Castellano's lies, his affair, his systematic deception of his wife and his father-in-law's political family. The affair had begun as Richard's game, played by Richard's rules. But slowly, methodically, Anya was changing the rules. And she was preparing for a different kind of game entirely. One where the stakes weren't just her immigration status but Richard's entire carefully constructed life. Anya Cruz missed her period for the first time in her adult life on January 12, 2024. Her cycle had been reliably consistent since she was 14 years old, arriving every 28 days with the precision of a metronome. When January 15th passed without the familiar cramping and bleeding, Anya felt not panic but something closer to cold calculation. She waited 3 more days, confirming the delay was real, before purchasing a pregnancy test from a Walgreens pharmacy in Coconut Grove, paying cash, wearing sunglasses despite the overcast weather. The test was taken in a public bathroom because Anya's shared apartment offered no privacy that could be guaranteed. The 2 pink lines appeared within 90 seconds, clear and definitive. Anya sat on the closed toilet lid for 11 minutes, her mind working through scenarios with the systematic logic that had kept her family fed after her father's death, that had gotten her through 6 years of call center work, that had carried her through 4 months of documenting Richard Castellano's lies. This pregnancy was either catastrophic or transformative, and which one it became depended entirely on how she handled the next few weeks. Medical confirmation came on January 22nd at a free clinic in Overtown, a facility serving Miami's poorest residents with donated equipment and overworked staff. The nurse practitioner, a Filipino woman named Dr. Lourdes Santiago, performed an ultrasound using a machine that was 10 years old but functional. 6 weeks pregnant, Dr. Santiago announced, showing Anya the grainy image on the screen where a small cluster of cells was visible, already dividing, already becoming something that would complicate everything. The father, is he in the picture? Dr. Santiago asked carefully, her tone suggesting she had seen enough young women in Anya's situation to know the question mattered. He will be, Anya replied with confidence she didn't entirely feel. He just doesn't know yet. Before telling Richard about the pregnancy, Anya spent 5 days planning her approach with the meticulous care of a prosecutor building a case. On January 23rd, she returned to attorney Sofia Rodriguez's office, this time paying $750 for an extended consultation. I'm pregnant, Anya said without preamble. The father is a wealthy married man who has been promising me work visa sponsorship for 5 months but hasn't filed any paperwork. I have recordings of every conversation we've had. What are my options? Attorney Rodriguez leaned back in her chair, fingers steepled beneath her chin, her expression a mixture of concern and professional assessment. Pregnancy doesn't give you legal immigration status, she said carefully. Even if you have the baby here, even if the baby is automatically a U.S. citizen, you remain undocumented and deportable. However, you have leverage. If this man is wealthy and married, if he has a public reputation to protect, if there's potential for scandal, then you have significant leverage. But we need to be clear about something, Ms. Cruz. Using recordings and pregnancy to extract money or marriage could be considered extortion under Florida law. You need to be very careful about how you proceed. The conversation that followed was legally complex and ethically ambiguous. Rodriguez explained the boundaries between legitimate negotiation and criminal blackmail, between requesting child support and demanding hush money, between documenting evidence and making threats. Anya listened carefully, taking notes in the small spiral notebook she carried everywhere, asking questions that demonstrated she understood the distinction between what was legal and what was simply effective. When the consultation ended, Anya had a clear strategy. She would tell Richard about the pregnancy. She would demand immediate action on visa sponsorship and financial support. She would make clear that she had documentation of their relationship. And she would stop short, barely short, of explicit threats that could be prosecuted as extortion. The revelation happened on January 25th at the Brickell condo during what was supposed to be their usual Thursday afternoon encounter. Richard arrived at 2:17, slightly late because of traffic on I-95, carrying takeout sushi from Zuma that cost $238. He was cheerful, relaxed, expecting the familiar routine of sex followed by casual conversation followed by his return to Velvet Dreams in time for the evening shift setup. Anya was waiting on the sofa, fully dressed, her expression serious enough that Richard's smile faded immediately. We need to talk, she said, the 4 words that have preceded countless relationship upheavals, countless life-altering conversations. Richard set down the sushi bag, his body language shifting from relaxed to defensive. What's wrong? He asked, though his tone suggested he already sensed the answer would be something he didn't want to hear. "I'm pregnant," Anya said simply. "It's yours. I'm keeping it. Now we need to discuss what happens next." Richard's face cycled through emotions with revealing speed. Shock first, his mouth opening slightly, his eyes widening. Then denial. "Are you sure? Are you sure it's mine?" The questions were predictable, reflexive, the response of a man confronted with consequences he had never seriously considered despite the obvious risks. Anya had anticipated this exactly. She pulled up the ultrasound photo on her phone, showed him the medical documentation from the clinic, provided a detailed timeline that correlated their encounters with her conception date. "Yes, I'm sure. Yes, it's yours. And yes, I'm keeping this baby." Richard's shock transformed into something uglier, a flash of anger that revealed what had always lurked beneath his charm. "How did this happen?" he demanded, his voice rising. "We were careful most of the time." Anya's response was calm, factual, devastating. "No, Richard, we weren't. You refused to use condoms after the first month. You said it felt better without them. You said you would pull out. You said a lot of things. This happened because of choices you made." The accuracy of her statement, the recordings she possessed that would prove every word, shut down Richard's anger immediately. He sat heavily on the sofa, his head in his hands, and for several minutes said nothing. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, calculating. "What do you want?" The question was direct, transactional, revealing that Richard had immediately shifted from emotional response to practical negotiation. Anya had rehearsed this moment, planned every word. "I want the visa sponsorship you've been promising me for 5 months. Real sponsorship, actual paperwork filed with immigration services. I want financial support during the pregnancy, $5,000 monthly. After the baby is born, I want $10,000 monthly in child support. And I want legitimacy for our child. I want you to acknowledge paternity. If you can't give me marriage, then at least give me these things." Richard's response was immediate and revealing. "I can't do the sponsorship. It's too traceable. My name would be on immigration paperwork. Elena would find out. Her father would find out. But the money, yes, I can do the money. $2,000 monthly during pregnancy, $3,000 after birth. Cash. No paper trail. That's my offer." The negotiation exposed Richard's priorities with brutal clarity. He was willing to pay to maintain secrecy but unwilling to provide the one thing Anya actually needed: legal immigration status. The offer was insulting, insufficient, and proof that Richard had never intended to help her in any meaningful way. Anya felt rage building in her chest but suppressed it, kept her voice level. "That's not enough, Richard. I need legal status. Without it, I can be deported at any time. Your child would be born to an undocumented mother. Is that what you want?" "What I want," Richard said, his voice hardening, "is for this situation to not exist. But since it does, we need to be practical. You can't force me to sponsor you. You can't force me to marry you. And threatening me won't work because I'll deny everything. It's your word against mine." The threat was explicit now, the mask fully removed. But Richard had made a critical miscalculation. He assumed Anya's word against his would be insufficient, that her economic vulnerability and undocumented status meant she had no real power. He had forgotten, or perhaps never truly registered, that Anya had been recording their conversations for months. She pulled out her phone, opened the voice recording app, and played a 30-second clip from their December 18th conversation. Richard's voice filled the condo, clear and unmistakable. "Elena and I haven't been really married for years. You understand me in ways she never has. Sometimes I think about what it would be like if circumstances were different." She stopped the playback and looked at Richard steadily. "I have 68 recordings like that, 43 hours total. Every promise you made about sponsorship, every complaint about your wife, every time you said you wished you could be with me instead of her. I have text messages, thousands of them. I have photos of you coming and going from this condo. I have documentation of every gift you've given me, including receipts you left behind showing they were purchased on your credit card. So no, Richard, it's not my word against yours. It's your own words, your own voice, your own documented behavior for 5 months." Richard's face drained of color as the implications registered. His career, his marriage, his father-in-law's political support, his planned city council campaign, everything depended on his carefully maintained image of faithful family man and respectable businessman. The recordings were a nuclear weapon pointed directly at the center of his life. When did you, he started, then stopped, recalculating. You've been recording me this whole time? I've been protecting myself this whole time, Anya corrected. You promised me visa sponsorship. You promised to help me build a legal life here. Instead, you've been stringing me along while refusing to use protection, and now I'm pregnant and undocumented and you're offering me barely enough money to survive. What did you expect me to do? Just trust you? The next 2 hours were a masterclass in negotiation under duress, with Richard trying various strategies to regain control of the situation. He offered more money, $10,000 monthly if she agreed to delete all recordings. Anya refused. He threatened to claim she had seduced and entrapped him. Anya countered that her recordings proved their relationship was consensual and that he had actively pursued her. He begged, actually begged, describing how revelation of the affair would destroy his daughter's lives, ruin his marriage, end his political aspirations. Anya's response was cold and accurate. You should have thought about that before you started sleeping with me. You should have thought about that before you refused to use condoms. You should have thought about that before you lied about sponsoring my visa. The final agreement reached that evening was unstable, temporary, and satisfactory to neither party. Richard would provide $5,000 monthly during the pregnancy, paid in cash, no documentation. He would not file visa sponsorship paperwork because he claimed it was too risky, too traceable. He would not acknowledge paternity publicly but would provide financial support for the child after birth. Anya would not release the recordings immediately but reserved the right to do so if Richard failed to meet his financial obligations or if she was threatened with deportation. But the most significant moment of the conversation came near its end, when Richard's desperation manifested as something darker than negotiation. What's to stop you from demanding more later? He asked, his voice tight with barely suppressed rage. Even if I pay everything you're asking, what's to stop you from releasing those recordings anyway? What's to stop this from becoming permanent blackmail? Anya's answer was honest and, in retrospect, tragically naive. I don't want to ruin your life, Richard. I want to share it. We made a baby together. That should mean something. If you help me, really help me, maybe we can build something real. Maybe eventually you can leave your wife and we can be a real family. I'm not trying to destroy you. I'm trying to survive. Richard said nothing in response, but his expression, captured by the recording still running on Anya's phone, suggested he had already begun considering more permanent solutions to what he now viewed as an existential threat. The pregnancy had transformed Anya from controllable mistress into dangerous liability, and Richard Castellano, who had spent his entire life avoiding consequences through money and manipulation, was beginning to understand that this time, neither would be sufficient. The recordings, the pregnancy, the leverage Anya now possessed, all of it pointed toward an inevitable confrontation that would end either in Richard's public exposure or in something much worse. And as Anya walked out of the Brickell condo that evening, carefully clutching her phone with its documentation of Richard's promises and threats, she had no way of knowing that she had just set in motion a chain of events that would end with her death in a locked nightclub bathroom 7 months later. The 8 months between Anya's pregnancy revelation in January 2024 and the murders on September 15th were characterized by escalating tension, deteriorating trust, and Richard Castellano's growing realization that his carefully compartmentalized life was collapsing in ways he could not control through money or manipulation. The financial support he provided was inconsistent, arriving late or in smaller amounts than promised, each shortfall accompanied by elaborate explanations about cash flow problems and business complications. By August, Anya understood with absolute clarity that Richard would never voluntarily give her what she needed. He would string her along indefinitely, paying just enough to maintain hope but never enough to provide real security. The pregnancy progressed normally despite Anya's stress. Monthly prenatal appointments at the Overtown Clinic confirmed a healthy male fetus, due November 15th. Dr. Santiago noted in her medical records that Anya appeared increasingly anxious, her blood pressure elevated, her affect flat. When asked about the baby's father, Anya's responses became shorter, more evasive. He's involved financially, she said on July 18th, but not emotionally. Dr. Santiago documented concerns about Anya's support system and mental health but had neither time nor resources to provide meaningful intervention beyond referrals to social services that Anya never followed up on. Richard's behavior during this period showed a man spiraling into paranoia and desperation. His wife Elena noticed changes that worried her enough to mention them to her father, Commissioner Rafael Mendoza, during a family dinner on August 4th. He's drinking more, sleeping less, distracted all the time, Elena told her father. When I ask what's wrong, he blames stress from the campaign planning. But it feels like something else. Commissioner Mendoza, who had built his political career on reading people and situations accurately, filed this information away with the instinct of someone who sensed problems but couldn't yet identify their nature. On August 15th, Richard took steps that demonstrated his deteriorating judgment. He purchased a Glock 19 9mm handgun from Freedom Arms, a licensed dealer in downtown Miami. The background check cleared immediately. Richard had no criminal record, no restraining orders, no disqualifying factors. The dealer, a man named Frank Morrison who would later testify at the inquest, remembered Richard as nervous, asking detailed questions about the weapon's reliability and stopping power. Most first-time buyers are excited or anxious, Morrison testified. This guy seemed desperate, like he was preparing for something specific. Richard also began liquidating assets with suspicious urgency. On August 18th, he sold $200,000 in stock portfolio investments, taking a tax hit that made no financial sense. On August 22nd, he withdrew $150,000 from a business account, claiming it was for nightclub renovations that were never actually contracted. On August 28th, he borrowed $150,000 from Commissioner Mendoza using a fabricated story about expanding Velvet Dreams into a second location. The accumulation of $500,000 in cash, assembled over 2 weeks and stored in a safe deposit box at Wells Fargo, suggested Richard was preparing for something, though what exactly remained unclear even to him. Meanwhile, Anya was building her own preparation for confrontation. On September 3rd, she met again with attorney Sofia Rodriguez, this time presenting a comprehensive plan. I'm going to demand $500,000 and either marriage or immediate visa sponsorship, Anya explained. If he refuses, I release everything to his wife, her father, and the media. Rodriguez's response was legally precise and ethically conflicted. What you're describing is extortion. If you explicitly threaten to release damaging information unless he pays money, that's a felony. You could be arrested, prosecuted, and definitely deported. But if you frame it as negotiating child support and compensation for his broken promises, if you present the recordings as documentation of his behavior rather than as explicit threats, you're in a legal gray area that might be defensible. The distinction was subtle but crucial. Anya could say Richard owed her money and legal status because of his promises and the pregnancy. She could say she had evidence proving his deception. She could even say she was considering sharing that evidence with people who deserved to know the truth. But she couldn't explicitly threaten to release the recordings unless he paid. The line between negotiation and extortion was thin, subjective, and ultimately depended on how prosecutors and judges interpreted her intent. Rodriguez provided one more critical service. On September 10th, Anya gave the attorney a sealed envelope containing copies of all recordings, photographs, text messages, and a detailed letter explaining the entire relationship with Richard. If anything happens to me, Anya instructed, if I'm deported, if I'm hurt, if I don't check in with you by 6 a.m. on September 16th, you release everything. Send it to Elena Castellano, to Commissioner Mendoza, to the Miami Herald, to every media outlet in South Florida. Rodriguez accepted the envelope with visible reluctance. I hope you know what you're doing, the attorney said. Men like Richard Castellano don't respond well to losing control. Please be careful. The final meeting was arranged through text messages that oscillated between Anya's growing demands and Richard's increasingly desperate attempts to delay, deflect, or negotiate lesser settlements. On September 12th, Anya sent the message that would seal both their fates. I'm 28 weeks pregnant. Your son is kicking. You have until September 15th to decide. $500,000 plus marriage proposal or immediate visa sponsorship. Otherwise, everything goes public September 16th. Meet me at Velvet Dreams after closing on September 15th. Come alone. Bring what I'm asking for. This ends that night, one way or another. Richard's response came 43 hours later, after consulting with no one, after drinking himself into a state where desperate decisions seemed rational. I'll be there. I'm bringing what you asked for. You're right. This ends that night. September 15th, 2024 began normally for both of them, a mundane quality that made the evening's violence even more jarring in retrospect. Anya worked her regular bartending shift at Velvet Dreams, 6 p.m. to midnight, serving cocktails to Miami's nightclub crowd with her usual professional efficiency. Her supervisor, Carlos Rivera, noted nothing unusual about her demeanor, though later he would remember she seemed distracted, checking her phone more frequently than normal, her hand occasionally resting on her pregnant belly with an expression that might have been fear or determination. Richard spent the day in frantic preparation. Morning was occupied with withdrawing the $500,000 from the Wells Fargo safe deposit box, counting it twice, packing it into a black duffel bag that had once held his soccer equipment. Afternoon brought a visit to his home office where he wrote the suicide note on Velvet Dreams letterhead, folding it carefully and placing it in the inside pocket of his Armani jacket. The note's existence proved premeditation, proved Richard had considered murder-suicide as a possible outcome before ever arriving at the nightclub. At 6:30 p.m., Richard had dinner with Elena and their daughters at their Coral Gables home, a meal that would haunt Elena for years afterward. He seemed calm, she later told police, almost peaceful in a way he hadn't been for months. He kissed each daughter, told them he loved them, praised Elena's cooking. It was, Elena said through tears during her victim impact statement, like he was saying goodbye without actually saying the words. At 8 p.m., Richard told Elena he had late business at the club, kissed her one final time, and drove to Velvet Dreams with the duffel bag of cash and the Glock 19 concealed in a shoulder holster beneath his jacket. He arrived at 9:45, went immediately to his office and waited for the club to close, for the staff to leave, for the moment when he and Anya would be alone. The security footage from Velvet Dreams, later analyzed frame by investigators, showed Richard dismissing staff at 11:30 p.m., citing the need to work on accounting. By 11:45, only Richard and Anya remained in the building. Richard disabled the security cameras in the second-floor executive area at 11:47, a deliberate act captured by other cameras that demonstrated consciousness of guilt and advanced planning. At 12:10 a.m. on September 16th, Richard and Anya entered the executive bathroom together. The door closed, the electronic lock engaged, and for the next 45 minutes, Anya's phone recorded every word of the conversation that would end with 5 gunshots and 2 bodies. The recording, played in its entirety during the investigative hearing, was almost unbearable to listen to. It began with Richard unzipping the duffel bag, showing Anya the money, $500,000 in cash as she had demanded. "Here it is," Richard said, his voice tight with stress. "Everything you asked for. Now we need to discuss the rest." Anya's voice was cautious, hopeful despite months of disappointment. "The visa sponsorship?" Richard's response crushed that hope immediately. "I can't do the sponsorship. I've explained this, but take the money. Go back to the Philippines. Have the baby there. I'll send monthly support. You'll be comfortable, your family will be provided for. This is the best solution for everyone." The rejection of her fundamental need, legal status in America, triggered Anya's final ultimatum. "I'm not leaving. This is my son's country. He's a U.S. citizen by birth. I want marriage, Richard, or at minimum, legitimate acknowledgement of paternity and visa sponsorship. If you can't give me that, then everyone needs to know the truth. Your wife, your father-in-law, the people planning to vote for you." What followed was Richard's systematic attempt to negotiate, plead, and finally threaten. He offered more money, $750,000, if she deleted all recordings and left the country. She refused. He begged, describing how revelation would destroy his daughter's innocence, end his marriage, ruin his political career. Anya's response was devastating in its accuracy. "You destroyed your daughter's innocence when you chose to have an affair. You ended your marriage when you got me pregnant. You ruined your career with your own choices. I'm just asking for basic fairness." The argument escalated as Richard realized Anya would not accept any solution that didn't include marriage or visa sponsorship, neither of which he would provide. "Even with the money, you'll keep the recordings," Richard said, his voice rising. "Even if I pay you, you'll come back for more. This never ends. You're going to destroy me no matter what I do." Anya's fatal mistake was revealing her insurance policy. "I gave copies of everything to my attorney," she said. "If anything happens to me, if I'm hurt or deported or if I just don't check in with her by 6 a.m. tomorrow, she releases all of it. To your wife, to the newspapers, to everyone. So you can't threaten me, Richard. You can't make this go away with intimidation. The only way forward is to accept responsibility." The revelation that even her death wouldn't protect his secrets broke something fundamental in Richard's psychology. The recording captured 8 seconds of silence, then Richard's voice, barely above a whisper. She won. She always wins. I couldn't let her, but now everyone will know anyway. What happened next occurred in approximately 12 seconds, though the recording made it feel both instantaneous and eternal. The sound of movement, rapid and violent. Anya's scream, cut short by the first gunshot to her chest. Her gasping cry of pain before the second shot hit her abdomen, striking the baby she carried. 3 more shots followed in rapid succession as Richard fired at her shoulder, neck, and hand as she tried to protect herself. The sounds of her body falling, of her gurgling attempts to breathe through blood filling her lungs, lasted approximately 93 seconds before silence indicated death. The recording continued for another minute and 17 seconds, capturing Richard's breakdown. "Oh God," he sobbed. "Oh God, what did I do? What did I do?" But then, terrifyingly, his voice steadied as he accepted the inevitable consequence of his actions. She won anyway. Even dead, she wins. Everyone will know. The lawyer has everything. It's over. It's all over. The final gunshot, the one Richard fired into his own right temple, came at 12:57 a.m. The Glock 19 fell from his hand, landing near his body. The recording continued until 4:17 a.m. when Anya's phone battery finally died, documenting nothing but silence and the aftermath of violence that destroyed 2 lives and devastated everyone connected to them. Detective Sarah Ramos spent the first 72 hours after the murders immersed in evidence that painted an unusually complete picture of what had happened and why. The recording from Anya's phone provided a minute-by-minute account of the final confrontation. Richard's suicide note confirmed premeditation. Financial records showed the $500,000 Richard had assembled. Text messages between Richard and Anya documented months of escalating conflict. The cloud drive Richard mentioned in his suicide note, password, Lost Everything 2024, contained additional documentation including Richard's own journal entries describing his desperation and increasingly dark thoughts about how to escape the situation. The forensic evidence corroborated every detail. Ballistics confirmed the Glock 19 found in Richard's hand had fired all 6 bullets, 5 into Anya Cruz and 1 into Richard himself. Gunshot residue on Richard's right hand proved he had fired the weapon. Blood spatter analysis showed Anya had been moving backward, trying to escape, when the first shot hit her. Autopsy results confirmed the sequence of shots and determined that the second bullet, the one that struck her abdomen, had killed the 6-month-old fetus she carried. Time of death for Anya was established at 12:56 a.m. Richard's death occurred 1 minute later at 12:57 a.m. The legal determination came swiftly because both perpetrator and victim were deceased. On September 18, 2024, the Miami-Dade medical examiner officially ruled the deaths a murder-suicide. Richard Vincent Castellano had murdered Anya Marie Cruz and her unborn child, then taken his own life. No criminal charges could be filed because both parties were dead. The case was closed from a criminal standpoint, though civil litigation would continue for years as various parties fought over estates, liability, and financial compensation. The notification of Elena Castellano happened at 4:37 a.m. on September 16, barely 3 hours after the bodies were discovered. Detective Ramos drove personally to the Coral Gables mansion, accompanied by a victim services counselor and a uniformed officer. Elena answered the door in her bathrobe, confusion giving way to terror as she saw the police on her doorstep. When Ramos delivered the news, "Your husband is dead, he killed a woman and himself," Elena's legs gave out. She collapsed onto the marble entryway floor, screaming denials until the reality penetrated and screaming transformed into a keening wail that woke her daughters sleeping upstairs. Sophia, 14 years old, and Isabella, 11, came running down the stairs to find their mother being restrained by the victim services counselor. Detective Ramos explaining in calm tones that their father was gone, that he had done something terrible, that nothing would ever be the same. The trauma of that morning would require years of intensive therapy for both girls, therapy their mother could barely afford after legal fees and scandal destroyed the family's financial stability. Commissioner Rafael Mendoza received notification at 5:15 a.m. through a phone call from Detective Ramos. His first response was denial, then fury, then a political calculation that had become reflexive over decades in public life. He immediately contacted his attorney, Jorge Delgado, and his crisis management consultant, Marcus Freeman. By 8 a.m., before news had broken publicly, Mendoza had crafted a statement emphasizing his family's victimhood, expressing sympathy for Anya Cruz's family, and announcing his immediate retirement from public life effective immediately. "My family has suffered an unimaginable tragedy," the statement read. "We ask for privacy as we mourn and grapple with revelations we never anticipated. We extend our deepest sympathies to the Cruz family for their loss." The media explosion began at 9:37 a.m. when WSVN-TV broke the story based on police scanner traffic and sources at Miami-Dade Police Department. By noon, the story had gone national. CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, all major networks covered what quickly became known as the Velvet Dreams murder-suicide. The combination of elements, wealthy nightclub owner, pregnant immigrant mistress, political connections, recordings documenting the affair, murder in a locked bathroom, created a perfect storm of public interest and sensational coverage. Social media reaction divided along predictable but revealing lines. One faction, using hashtags like Justice for Anya, portrayed her as a victim of exploitation, an undocumented immigrant manipulated by a powerful man who used his wealth and promises to control her, then killed her when she demanded accountability. Another faction, coalescing around Remember Daniel, the name Anya had chosen for her son, focused on the unborn child and condemned both Richard and Anya for choices that led to 3 deaths. A third group, smaller but vocal, argued both parties were morally culpable. Richard for his systematic deception and murder, Anya for what they characterized as blackmail and manipulation. Attorney Sofia Rodriguez released the sealed envelope as instructed when Anya failed to check in by 6 a.m. on September 16th. The recordings, all 68 of them totaling 43 hours, were provided to Elena Castellano, Commissioner Mendoza, and the Miami Herald by 9 a.m. The Herald began publishing transcripts and analysis on September 17th, with reporter Maria Santos writing a series of articles that won her the Florida Press Association's Investigative Journalism Award. The recordings revealed the depth of Richard's deception, the systematic nature of his lies about visa sponsorship, and the desperation that had driven Anya to increasingly aggressive demands. The legal aftermath was complex and prolonged. Elena Castellano filed for posthumous divorce on September 20th, seeking to separate herself legally and financially from her husband's estate. She also filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Anya's estate, claiming that Anya's blackmail had directly caused Richard's psychological breakdown and subsequent violence. The suit sought damages of $10 million. The Cruz family, represented by a Filipino-American legal advocacy organization, filed their own wrongful death suit against Richard's estate, claiming he had exploited Anya's vulnerable immigration status, manipulated her with false promises, and murdered her when she demanded basic fairness. They sought $15 million in damages plus acknowledgement that Daniel Cruz, Anya's unborn son, had been a victim of Richard's violence. The civil cases settled in March 2023 for undisclosed terms, though court documents suggested the Cruz family received approximately $2 million from Richard's estate after legal fees, with Elena retaining control of the remaining assets including the Coral Gables house, Richard's share of Velvet Dreams, and insurance policies. The settlement included provisions that neither party would speak publicly about the case or each other. The broader implications of the case reverberated through Miami's immigrant community, political establishment, and legal system. Immigration advocacy groups used Anya's story to highlight the vulnerability of undocumented workers to exploitation by employers who promise visa sponsorship but never deliver. Attorney Sofia Rodriguez, who left immigration law after Anya's death, became a professor at University of Miami Law School, teaching a course on immigration ethics that used the Cruz case as a central example of power dynamics and legal responsibility. The political fallout was substantial. Commissioner Rafael Mendoza's retirement created a power vacuum in Miami-Dade politics that took years to resolve. His daughter Elena sold the Coral Gables mansion and moved with her daughters to North Carolina in 2023, seeking anonymity and a fresh start far from Miami's suffocating scrutiny. Velvet Dreams Nightclub was sold in October 2024 for $3.2 million. The buyer, a development company, demolished it in January 2023 and built luxury condominiums on the site. 2 years after the murders, the major figures in the case have scattered to different corners of attempting to rebuild shattered lives. Elena Castellano remarried in 2023 to a childhood friend, a teacher named David Morrison who had no connection to her previous life. Her daughters, now 16 and 13, are thriving in therapy and new schools where no one knows their history. Commissioner Mendoza died in November 2023 from heart failure, his health deteriorating rapidly after retirement and disgrace. His obituary in the Miami Herald was respectful but brief, making no mention of the scandal that ended his political career. Maria Cruz, Anya's mother, used the settlement money to move her family out of their cramped Quezon City apartment into a modest house in Antipolo. She established a small business, a sari-sari store that provides steady income. Her younger children, Miguel, Sofia, and Carmen, are all pursuing education with opportunities that Anya's sacrifice, however tragic, made possible. But Maria keeps a shrine to her eldest daughter in the living room, photographs of Anya at various ages surrounding a candle that burns perpetually. In interviews with Filipino media, Maria has been consistent in her message. My daughter did what she thought she had to do to survive in a system that gave her no good options. She shouldn't have died for it. Dr. Patricia Flores, the sociologist who provided expert commentary during the investigation, published a paper in 2023 titled The Cruz Castellano Case: Immigration, Power, and Violence in Contemporary America. Her analysis became required reading in criminology and immigration studies courses across the country. The case represents the convergence of multiple systemic failures, Dr. Flores wrote. Immigration policies that create desperation, economic inequality that enables exploitation, gender dynamics that give men power to make promises they never intend to keep, and a legal system that often fails to protect the vulnerable until violence has already occurred. The recordings, the centerpiece of evidence, remain sealed by court order in accordance with the civil settlement. Only law enforcement, attorneys involved in the case, and expert witnesses have heard the complete 47 minutes of Anya's final conversation with Richard. The public knows only what was included in trial transcripts and media reports. But those who have heard the recordings describe them as almost unbearable, not because of the violence itself, which occurs in just 12 seconds, but because of the 45 minutes preceding it, where two people with incompatible needs and impossible positions try desperately to find a resolution that doesn't exist. The case of Richard Castellano and Anya Cruz forces uncomfortable questions about power, exploitation, immigration, and the limits of survival instincts. Was Anya a victim who fought back using the only weapon available to her? Or did her escalation to what resembled blackmail push a desperate man past the point of rationality? Was Richard a calculating predator who murdered to protect his privilege? Or was he a flawed man who made terrible choices and then, faced with inescapable consequences, chose the worst solution imaginable? The truth, as it almost always is in cases involving human beings rather than monsters, is complicated. Richard exploited Anya's vulnerability, lied systematically about visa sponsorship, and when confronted with the consequences of his actions, chose murder over accountability. That is unambiguous evil regardless of whatever pressure he felt. But Anya's decision to record everything, to leverage the recordings for money and marriage, and to threaten public exposure moved beyond simple self-protection into territory that was legally and ethically ambiguous. The pregnancy may have been accidental, but her response to it was calculated, strategic, designed to maximize pressure on Richard. None of which justifies murder. Nothing Anya did warranted death. Her choices, even if they crossed ethical or legal lines, were not capital offenses. She deserved the chance to have her baby, to build a life, to face whatever legal or moral consequences her actions might have earned through proper channels. Richard took that chance away with 5 bullets fired in rapid succession in a locked bathroom. On September 15th each year since 2024, a small group gathers at Mount Nebo Miami Memorial Gardens where Anya Cruz is buried. Her mother Maria travels from the Philippines. Her siblings attend when they can. Attorney Sofia Rodriguez comes, laying flowers and spending time in silent contemplation of a client she couldn't save. They stand at the grave marker that reads, Anya Marie Cruz, 1995 to 2024, beloved daughter, sister, and mother to Daniel. She fought for her dreams. The simple epitaph captures the tragedy at the heart of this case. Anya did fight for her dreams, using whatever tools were available to someone in her position. The American immigration system that would have taken decades to navigate legally. The economic desperation that made Richard's promises seem like salvation. the recordings that transformed from insurance policy to weapon, and ultimately, the confrontation that she walked into believing she held all the leverage, not understanding that Richard had already decided the outcome before he ever entered that bathroom. The question that haunts everyone who studies this case is whether it could have been prevented. If immigration provided realistic paths to legal status for people like Anya, would she have been vulnerable to Richard's exploitation? If employers faced serious consequences for false sponsorship promises, would Richard have been able to manipulate her for months? If Anya had reported Richard's behavior to authorities instead of building a blackmail case, would intervention have saved her life? Or would she simply have been deported, sent back to the Philippines with nothing, her family's desperate situation unchanged? There are no satisfying answers to these questions. What remains are two bodies buried in different cemeteries, two families destroyed by choices and circumstances, and a community forced to confront the darkest possibilities of immigration, exploitation, and violence in contemporary America. The Velvet Dreams murder-suicide will be studied in law schools and criminology courses for decades, a perfect storm of systemic failures and individual choices that ended the only way it could have once Richard purchased that gun and Anya issued her ultimatum. The tragedy wasn't inevitable from the beginning, but it became inevitable somewhere along the way, probably on that January evening when Anya revealed her pregnancy and Richard realized his carefully compartmentalized life had become impossible to maintain. From that moment forward, the path led inexorably to September 15th, to a locked bathroom, to 5 gunshots and 2 bodies, to the destruction of everyone involved in the collision of desperate needs that American society created but refuses to adequately address.